It was supposed to be a warm summer afternoon, filled with laughter, the smell of grilled meat, and the comforting chatter of family catching up. Neighbors remembered hearing music, the clinking of glasses, and bursts of joy echoing from the backyard. But by nightfall, that same yard was silent, except for the flashing red and blue lights cutting through the darkness. What began as a family barbecue had spiraled into one of the most chilling triple homicide cases the town had ever seen. It was June 22nd, 2008, a warm Sunday afternoon in San Francisco's Excelsior district. The air carried that familiar comfort of summer, sunlight soft on the streets, the kind of day that makes you want to linger outside. For Tony Bologna, it had been a good day. A devoted father, a hard-working supermarket night shift supervisor, and a beloved youth coach, Tony had spent the afternoon at a family barbecue. He was joined by two of his sons, Michael, who was 20, and Matthew, who was just 16. They had eaten well, laughed with relatives, and enjoyed the kind of easy happiness that makes life worth living. Also with them was Tony's 18-year-old son, Andrew. The family was heading home together in their silver Honda Civic, unaware that the short drive ahead would become the final moments they would share. As they neared the intersection of Congdon and Maynard Streets, the car slowed to a stop. Andrew was in the back seat, relaxed and quiet, perhaps thinking about plans for the rest of the evening. Tony focused on the road, ready to turn toward home. But another car, a dark Chrysler 300, approached, rolling up alongside them. Inside the Chrysler sat two men, Edwin Ramos, a 21-year-old Salvadoran immigrant, and Wilfredo Flaco Reyes. Both were members of MS-13, one of the most violent gangs in the world. Hours earlier, there had been tension between MS-13 and their rivals, the Norteños. Ramos and Reyes were looking for revenge. In the split second that followed, they mistook the Bologna family for rival gang members. It was a mistake that would change everything. Without warning, the quiet summer afternoon exploded into chaos. Gunfire erupted, bullets shattering the car's windows and slicing through the metal. Tony Bologna was hit instantly, slumping forward over the steering wheel. Michael, sitting in the passenger seat, was struck and killed where he sat. Matthew, gravely wounded, clung to life for 2 days before succumbing to his injuries in the hospital. In the back seat, Andrew ducked low, trying to make himself invisible as glass shattered around him. The Chrysler sped away, leaving behind a scene of devastation that would haunt the neighborhood for years to come. Neighbors, startled by the rapid burst of gunshots, rushed outside. Some froze in shock at what they saw, others frantically called 911. The acrid smell of gunpowder still lingered in the air when the first police units arrived, sirens wailing through the warm afternoon. Officers found Tony and Michael beyond help. Matthew was rushed to San Francisco General Hospital, where doctors fought to save him. Andrew, still trembling in disbelief, was the only one who could speak about what had happened. Shaken but determined, he told police that he had seen the shooter's face. He knew who it was. Edwin Ramos was not a stranger to law enforcement. Born in El Salvador, he had come to the United States illegally as a teenager. By his early 20s, Ramos had been linked to violent crimes and suspected of deep involvement with MS-13. He had been arrested before, for assault, attempted robbery, and even for carrying a gun as a juvenile. Yet because of San Francisco's sanctuary city policies at the time, these offenses had not resulted in deportation. For some, this detail would later become as shocking as the murders themselves. On June 25th, Just 3 days after the killings, police tracked Ramos to his home in El Sobrante. He was arrested and charged with 3 counts of murder and 1 count of attempted murder. The Bologna family's funeral was an outpouring of grief, unlike anything the neighborhood had seen in years. 3 caskets, side by side, stood at the front of the church. Friends, relatives, and even strangers who had been touched by the story came to pay their respects. Danielle Bologna, now a widow, clutched photographs of her husband and sons, her face pale with sorrow. Her surviving children, Andrew and 14-year-old Nani, stayed close by her side. People whispered about the cruelty of it all, how a father and 2 sons could be taken so quickly, how a family barbecue could end in. Ramos's defense painted a different picture. A young man with a tragic childhood, abused by his mother, who had joined a gang for survival. They insisted it was Wilfredo Reyes who had done the shooting. But then Andrew Bologna took the stand. In a voice tight with emotion, he identified Ramos without hesitation as the man who had killed his father and brothers. His testimony was powerful and unwavering. The jury listened to the evidence, the gang connections, and the survivors' account. They heard about Ramos's past crimes, his involvement with MS-13, and the utter lack of any link between the Bologna family and gang activity. Prosecutors called it exactly what it was: a senseless execution, born from a deadly assumption. On May 7, 2012, the jury delivered their verdict: guilty on 3 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of attempted murder. Ramos showed little emotion as the decision was read. In June, Judge Charles Haynes sentenced him to 183 years to life in prison, 3 consecutive life terms without parole. Calling the murders brutal and senseless, the judge made it clear that Ramos would never again walk free. For Danielle Bologna, the verdict was both justice and a reminder of what had been lost. No prison term could bring her family back. The case, however, sparked a national debate about immigration and sanctuary city laws. Critics pointed to Ramos's criminal history and argued that he should have been deported long before the murders. Supporters countered that the tragedy was the result of gang violence, not immigration policy. Danielle filed a wrongful death lawsuit against the city, but the courts dismissed it, ruling that the city was not legally responsible. In court, Danielle confronted Ramos directly, her voice steady, despite the tears. She told him, "This is what you did. No mother should ever have to take her son off life support." Her daughter, Nani, just 14 at the time, also addressed the killer. She said, "I hate you with all my heart. I hope you never forget my face, because I will never forget yours." Years later, she would speak publicly about the empty spaces in her home, about hearing echoes of her brother's laughter that weren't really there, and about how no one truly understands the weight of such loss unless they've lived it. Ramos appealed his conviction, claiming his trial had been unfair, but in 2014, the appeals court upheld the verdict and sentence. Wilfredo Reyes, the man Ramos claimed was the actual shooter, was never caught. Some believe he fled to Central America, where he remains to this day. For the Bologna family, the unanswered questions are a permanent scar. The murders of Tony, Michael, and Matthew Bologna remain one of San Francisco's most haunting crimes, not just for their brutality, but for how ordinary the day had been before it all happened. A father, his sons, a barbecue, and a drive home. And then, nothing but silence. It is a reminder that violence can strike without warning, that a single wrong assumption can destroy lives in an instant. For Danielle, Andrew, and Nani, that summer day in 2008 is frozen in time. And for the rest of us, It stands as a story we cannot afford to forget. The guests, unaware of the nightmare awaiting them, laughed and chatted as they entered the house. The warm glow of the dining room lights made everything feel safe. Plates were set, wine was poured, and the aroma of the meal filled the air. It was the perfect picture of hospitality. Except beneath it all, a darkness was already at work. The host smiled politely, offering refills and making light conversation, but in his mind, the evening had a far more sinister purpose. As the night went on, the atmosphere shifted subtly. Some guests began to feel uneasy, though they couldn't quite put a finger on why. Was it the strange way the host kept watching them, or the fact that he barely touched his own food? One woman, seated near the window, noticed the curtains were drawn tightly shut, even though it was a pleasant evening outside. Another guest tried to excuse himself to the bathroom, only to find the door locked from the outside. By the time the first sign of trouble appeared, it was too late. One guest, mid-sentence, suddenly slumped forward, his glass shattering on the table. Another began coughing violently, clawing at her throat. Panic erupted around the table as more people realized something was terribly wrong. The host remained eerily calm, his face unreadable. Whatever was happening was not an accident. It was planned, deliberate, and merciless. In the chaos, whispers of betrayal echoed in the air. Some of the guests knew each other well, others had just met that night. But all of them shared the same desperate thought. Why is this happening? The host, pacing slowly around the table, began speaking in a low, almost conversational tone. He spoke of old grudges, of debts unpaid, of wrongs never forgiven. It became clear that this night was not random. Every single person had been chosen for a reason. Minutes felt like hours as the situation spiraled into madness. Desperation drove some to plead for their lives, promising anything if they could be spared. Others tried to fight back, using whatever they could find as weapons, but the host seemed always one step ahead. He had planned every detail, anticipated every move, and ensured that escape was impossible. The house became a prison, each room holding its own silent menace. By the time it was over, silence filled the house once more. The table was littered with overturned glasses, shattered plates, and untouched food. Chairs lay on their sides, and the once inviting home was now a grave for all who had entered. The host stood in the quiet, breathing slowly, his eyes scanning the aftermath. Outside, the night went on as if nothing had happened. No one in the neighborhood knew that, just a few steps away, an entire dinner party had vanished from the world forever. What was supposed to be a warm summer evening, filled with laughter, the smell of grilled food, and the closeness of family, ended as one of the most haunting tragedies this small town had ever seen. A place where children once played in the yard was now sealed off with police tape. The echoes of joy had been replaced by silence, a silence so heavy it almost screamed. The tragedy didn't just take lives, it shattered an entire community. Neighbors who once greeted each other with friendly waves now locked their doors a little earlier. Parents who once allowed their kids to run around freely in the evening now kept them close, their eyes scanning for unseen dangers. And the family that had gathered for nothing more than a simple meal was now reduced to 3 gravestones and memories that hurt too much to remember. It's chilling to think how quickly life can shift from celebration to catastrophe. In less than an hour, love turned to loss, and laughter turned to screams. It's a reminder that danger doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it hides in plain sight, waiting for the moment when everyone least expects it. As investigators continue to piece together the full story, one question lingers in the air like the smoke from that night's barbecue. How could this have happened? And perhaps even more disturbing, could it happen again? This wasn't just another crime story to fill a headline. It was a brutal reminder that even the safest places, the most familiar faces, can hold secrets and dangers we may never see coming. For the surviving family members, there will never be closure, only the endless ache of what was stolen from them on that warm evening. And for the rest of us, the story of that barbecue serves as a grim cautionary tale. Sometimes the people we welcome into our homes are the ones we should fear the most. Because in the end, no one ever thinks their last meal will be shared at their own table.